Welcome back, everybody. We're just gonna recap on what we talked about in our last episode. We were talking about who the Son is, the fact that God expressed His love in giving His Son. That was the biggest expression of, who God is and His love that He has for us. He gave us His Son. And we talked about not limiting God's capabilities and how God, glorified the Son, exalted the Son. We were looking at Hebrews and we saw so much about the Father and the Son. So now as we're moving, we recognized and identified who the Father is. He's God. As we're talking, we're gonna recognize God is the Father when we're speaking. And then we have a Son who was begotten. And we talk about now, looking at John 1:1. There we kind of touched on it, but we're going to go back to it and start off with, this creation aspect. We're going to look at it once again, and then we'll go into Romans 1:20. But let's start off with John 1:1. Who wants to read it?
I'll read it.
Good job, Lance.
All right. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's it?
Yeah. And this one was in the beginning with God. We're just trying to lay the foundation here of creation. Today's episode, we're going to kind of focus on what creation means in a biblical sense. We're just going to go back over it, unlearn what we've learned before and relearn through the Spirit. Let the Spirit tell us, what really happened in creation and who was there in creation. So let's go now to, as we're seeing here, we identified who the Word was, which is the Son, and we identified who God is, which is the Father. They were there in the beginning. So now, we can just kind of go Romans 1:20 here. Anybody has any thoughts to put into that?
Yeah, when it says they were there in the beginning, and we established that the Father and the Son in the beginning was the Word, like Theo had said in one of our past episodes, that two God being one God nature, right? And so we see that this before anything ever existed, God has always been there. There's none before Him, and He is the source of all. He brought forth His Son. And now here we have the scenario set up for where creation takes place. And this is now where we go into transition into Romans 1:20, right?
Cool. All right, so Romans 1:20. And it says, I read in the KJV. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. What is this text talking about?
Well, we might have to go a few verses. Well, we have to say, define who is Him. Who's Paul talking about here?
Yeah, that's true. Who's he talking about?
It says, verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So clearly talking about.
Yeah.
So the invisible things of Him. So what are the invisible things of God that are clearly seen?
Invisible things of Him.
Invisible things of Him. What do you mean by that, Lance?
Maybe His character, maybe His likeness, maybe, things that we don't necessarily think about normally, you know what I mean? It says that are clearly seen. Are clearly seen.
Yeah, clearly is a strong word.
It's a strong word. So invisible, like when you think invisible, it's like less visible. So you're not really, so it's like, what is that? You're clearly seeing invisible things.
Or not visible at all.
Not visible at all.
Yeah, but you're clearly seeing it.
Yeah, and what is showing this stuff? What is now? It says creation.
Creation.
Yeah, I
So-
think creation reveals. I mean, if we're going to touch on it, let's just look at what Colossians 1 was saying, as we talked about a little bit earlier. Colossians 1:13. We're starting from verse 12. So sticking to the whole invisible concept of a revelation and creation, it says, "Giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son." His dear Son is, verse 14 is picking up, "in whom we have redemption through his blood." That's the blood of his dear Son, "even the forgiveness of sins." Verse 15, his dear Son again, who is the image of the invisible God, the same invisible God we just talked about. His dear Son is the firstborn of every creature. And it says, "For by him, his dear Son, were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him," again, this is the Son, "and for him," again, this is the Son. "And he is before all things, and by him all things consist." So we see the invisible God here, wrapping right back to what we just read in Romans 1, had a Son that we talked about in previous chapters, and this Son was before all things. It didn't say the Son was created, but that the Son was before all things. We already established that he was begotten and brought forth. Now let's look at how creation gives us insight into that relationship between the Father and the Son.
Yeah, also, you made the point, I just want to emphasize it more, how Hebrews 1:3 says, "Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person."
Yeah.
I know the verses goes on longer, but just that part, just to emphasize the point he made about being the image of the invisible God.
Yeah. And, actually going back to Romans 1:20, the invisible things of him, or the invisible God and the creation, they're expressing things that sometimes, I guess in our normal Christian talk, we're like, these are things that we can't know. But this is saying God's eternal power and his Godhead should be understood because of creation.
And even that right there, when you talk about the Godhead,
Yeah.
right, of God, we see where Godhead there just means divine nature. And so the divine nature, and there are only two beings, like you said, that possess the divine nature, God and his Son.
Yeah, going back to that whole point that we talked about on previous episode, Godhead doesn't mean, normally they talk about Godhead being
Like a structure or like
structure.
some type of...
a couple of people, or three people, or whatever. But that's not what it's saying. Godhead in the Greek is divine or
Not
divinity.
Even, it's interesting. Even just the dictionary, I just put it up. It says divine nature.
Yeah. So
That's all it means,
The dictionary says that. Dictionary.com. Godhead is a noun. God, divine nature.
yeah.
You know,
and
In the lovely things of nature and creation, we should be able to learn more of the wisdom of God and the divine nature,
yeah.
right? And so that's why now we're going to go to Genesis to see how God created, right?
And what he revealed about himself,
And
what he created.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And even now, as we look in nature, what we could see, in as far as this like systems that God has set up, that would bring His divine nature and bring it even bring these things even more light to us, right? We could see His image
Yep. And
clearly.
Clearly.
The without excuse though is
Yeah,
powerful.
that's where I want to
Without
go.
excuse.
Without
Excuse,
excuse.
you
Because
know?
my grandmother,
without excuse.
she would always tell me, "You're going in too deep. It's too
Right.
deep. Who caught the throat, man? I'll find you. But yeah, it's too deep, and I'm just like, if God has revealed something to us in Scripture,
Right.
you know, He wants us to know about it. He wants us to know more about who He is, and it's like we've been saying, it's clearly understood. And so if you go deeper into the text, also, you're talking about people that it says against all ungodliness, unrighteousness, men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because they which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God had showed it unto them. So it's not even talking about a righteous person. It's talking about ungodly people that should know this truth.
That's a good point.
Good point.
I mean, yeah. I mean, no man will be able
Like
to.
everybody.
Yeah, I think that the bottom line is right. No man can stand before God and say God has not given us any light. I think the developed verse gives even clarity. It says, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God. I think that is part of the fundamental problem that I've seen occur over the Christian experience, is that now we have confusion about who God is, and we're not glorifying the one true living God and His Son, as the Bible clearly gives us direction to do, but there is confusion.
Yeah, but God said it was clear. like, I'm agreeing with you. Like, we're confused, but God said it was clear.
It's
like,
clear, without excuse.
And I know we're gonna read.
interesting
I know
how-
we're gonna read Genesis.
Oh, you guys are.
I know we're gonna read Genesis, but this Psalms verse just keeps like yelling at me, in a good way. Psalms 19: the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth His handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and the night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. So it's like there's no barriers. Like just because you don't speak Spanish, like or English or whatever, like
The heavens are
no
clear.
language where their voice is not heard.
No, like,
I know we're gonna read Genesis, but that
Yeah.
verse is just.
That's good.
Nature is a great revelation of God. I think last week through the text messages, people were sending different things about people that didn't believe in God and stuff. And there was one about a comedian, Spears, Aaron Spears, I think it was. But he was talking about, you know, a black atheist, being a black atheist. And he said he hadn't reached the dark side yet because of nature.
Wow.
Because his thing was, I'm seeing all these things happen. Black, you know, we've been in bondage, we've been in slavery, we've been this. He's talking about this person died here, this person died over here. The people that were in God's house, they were shot in God's house, you know. But I can't really go in completely in the dark side because I see the flowers, I see the trees, I see
stars.
like you.
You can't. You have to acknowledge those things. Those things are.
That could have came out of just a bang.
When I was in college, I took 2 philosophy classes, Philosophy 101, Philosophy of Religion. In Philosophy 101, there was a book, and it gave different philosophers, and one of the philosophers talked about the watchmaker. And it talked about the intelligent watchmaker. When you look at a watch, how intricate a watch is, it could have not just come by itself. Someone has to have created a watch. You know, it had to be designed by someone. The same thing with our human body and who we are, with nature, how nature, you know, the leaves fall at a certain time, then they grow in a, you know, you have to, it didn't just come by chance.
Yo, that's on point, because I always talk to my wife about the seasons and how like everything plays a crucial role in like just the corporation that is Earth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like the snow is essential for the flowers, just as the leaves that degrade into and provide nutrients. Like all of that is intricate. Like y'all been to the beach before, right?
Yeah.
Have y'all seen the beach? Have y'all seen like the ocean in the night? And you just come on. Like,
Yeah, that just can't just come out.
Nature has something to say, like about God, like, and it's clear. And you know, I think if you look at it, if God and His Son, and through His Son, created all things, what is the biggest creation that He made that speaks the most about Him? Are there levels to it? Is there one thing that He made who was made in His image?
all right, that's a good question.
Like, if there's something that speaks to who God is, to his Godhead, to his eternal power, that would be the thing that was made in his image. And that's going straight to Genesis right there. Like, we were made in his image. So I think we should go straight to that.
All right, Dwight, you got me excited to go to Genesis.
So we can, start, where are we starting from?
Let's start from the beginning, man.
We're going to go from the beginning. So we establish Father and the Son. And Genesis 1 says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning was the first day. Boom.
Okay. So God is in here at the jump. The Spirit of God moved on the face of the waters. And I guess we have to go into that.
So when it says in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, what are we looking at? Are we looking at just pertaining to this earth, or pertaining to it as a universe, right? And I think it's in reference to us right here, because in John 1, when it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, we're talking about before anything was created. And so now when we look at in the beginning here, I'm thinking this pertains to us now as this earth.
Our heaven and our earth.
Our heaven, our earth. Because that's what God now is now doing here. Because we know that, as you just see the setup, right? We established before, and we established in the beginning as of all time. Timeline pertaining to us.
I can buy that.
Yeah, about that. All right. So, right. And so now we see God now is illustrating that now until he's going about doing his handiworks. And so we got to make sure God is doing his handiworks here. And he says, the earth was without form and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. So we see God is now speaking.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
You say that, Theo?
No, I think a lot of people get confused when they see the Spirit of God. They say there is another being that is present other than what we read earlier, that it was the Father and the Son present at creation.
So you want to go there right now?
Well, I do think I just want to bring our attention back to when Christ was being baptized. It stated very clearly that the Spirit of God descended in the form of a dove. I believe that's in Matthew chapter, I don't know if that's 14.
Chapter 3.
Is it 14, 3?
Chapter 3.
3. But it stated there that the Spirit of God descended in the form of a dove, and God spoke from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son. Clearly we know that this is the Father speaking. His presence, as we discussed in the previous chapter discussions, was that his presence is not limited to being in one place. He is the omnipresent source of all things. Therefore, in that same light, I see that text in Genesis chapter 1 being very similar to what we see in, was it Matthew chapter
3, verse, chapter 3 and down.
That God, the Father, is speaking these things into existence, not independent of his Son being present, but that, as the scripture shows, that the Son was with him, and through him were all things created.
Verse 16.
And so, that's my thought on it is, let's not get confused trying to introduce another God being other than the very presence of the Father, his personal presence, his omnipresence.
Which is magnificent.
His magnificence,
I can buy that too.
We're just buying stuff?
Go buy that. That makes sense.
It's his magnificence. We're talking about the source of all things.
Yeah.
Colossians 8, 1 Corinthians 8:6.
Yeah.
There's one God the Father, of whom are all things, the source. This is him. He is once again in the position now of being over all of his creation with his Son by his side, as we looked at in Romans 1:20. And they are together doing a marvelous work that gives more insight into their relationship.
Yeah, and I think, as we progress in this understanding of creation, and, I think we talked about who's the most qualified to speak on who God is. That was the expression, right? That was Christ. But now we're looking at who's the most qualified to speak on who God is out of creation.
Based off creation.
Based on creation.
And right there, we're looking at those who, us. We were made in his image. So we should also now, we're going to reflect that image in certain ways. Like, as we were talking about, God's spirit hovered over the face of the water. His spirit is not independent of himself. Because if we're in his image, we should have a spirit that is not necessarily walking next to us, outside of us, right? So I think that, we'll get into more of the spirit, but it's just to clarify, like, Scripture is not pointing here, Spirit of God, as to be someone other than the Father.
So what you're saying is that your spirit is your spirit. There isn't a Dwight the Spirit that exists apart from you.
If we want, we could go to that text. What was that text? It was 1
Corinthians 5. 5 verse 3 to 5.
1 Corinthians 5 verse.
Is it 1 Corinthians 5?
I think it's 2.
Y'all hear that sound?
It's called Scriptures.
Bible's turning.
1 Corinthians 2. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 2 verses
11.
You can start at 10. And it says, but God had revealed them unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. Verse 11, for what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of a man which is in him? Even so, the things of...
Even so, right? Even so is just like. So yeah, make sure, like, even so that clarifies, just like God has a spirit.
Once again, we were made in his image, right? So it's going to reflect in that same way. What, you about to say something?
No, I'm just letting you clarify because we have to show how we were made in his image.
Yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Yeah, so.
We just want this a little, segue, sidebar.
Gotcha.
But just to clarify, in the next, even so, verse 11, so the things of God knoweth no man but the Spirit of God. So it's just a nice little parallel here. And now just, I'll read verse 12 too. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God.
That's crucial.
It's
possessive.
It's possessive. It's not of his own. It belongs to someone. It belongs to the Father.
Like, think about it's contrary to what this is saying, would be thinking like, all right, it's God the Spirit is the one doing this stuff, or the one thinking, or the one that Paul is talking about in Corinthians. But no, you can't come from this. I mean, I would hope you don't come from this scripture reading this and think that this is someone other than the Father.
Right. I just gotta say, man, it's one of the best words. Like, I just gotta emphasize, free is always nice to see.
Freely given to us
of God, that we are saying that we should know. Yep. Because he has made it clear, right? So.
So let's go back to Genesis then and try to.
We don't have to go through the whole detail of creation. We could go to like the man being created.
I do want to point out that before we get to man, God created everything in a consistent fashion. The evening and the morning, day and night.
1, 2, 3. First day.
It's just one and the other, one or the other. God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass and herb." And then it says in verse 14, "Let there be lights in the firmament," right? And he called seasons, and let there be lights. God was consistent with everything that he did. God made 2 great lights, a greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars, right? And then in verse 20, God said, "Let the waves bring forth abundantly the creatures." And then in verse 22, God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." So he gave to the creatures the ability to multiply. Everything that was living on the earth, it said, and everything that was in the waters, and the fowls of, he brought forth of their kind.
I don't want to skip over the point of in 20, when God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that had life." and fowls that may fly above the earth in the open firmaments of heaven. And so you see where God said that the waters bring forth, and from the waters we see the kind of creatures that came forth from the water, right? They had moving creatures that have like fowls, that's birds, and above that fly above the earth and the firmaments. And so we see that's like you were just saying, there's an order, but God also has a consistent system in which He's using with bringing forth. Things are coming forth from something after He said, "Let there be light," and God stopped. After He made the foundation of the world, then from that foundation, I would say, things were coming forth from. He then commanded things to come forth from life, to come forth from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For God is not the author of confusion, but
Right.
of peace.
And if you look at verse 24, he also says, "And let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind." So from the earth, we see came forth living creatures like cattle, and then keep in mind everything after his kind. You know,
So foundation and then come forth.
Forth.
So there's always foundation laid, and then everything brought forth from that foundation.
And everything after its kind. So you have cattle after their kind, you have creeping things, beasts of the earth after his kind, and it was so. So nothing came from nothing. No monkey came from a dog. No dog came from a monkey. Dog, and that after his kind. Cat. God kept it in that way, in His consistency.
Yeah.
Everything was
And in the conclusion of all these things, He says that it was good.
Yeah.
Just so you know, that's like the stamp of it was good.
It was good.
It says, "And God made the beasts after his kind, and the cattle of every kind, and the creeping things upon the earth, and after his kind, and God saw it was good." And remember also what He said. He told them I think Theo had read it there when He said for them to multiply. Yes, in verse 22. And God blessed them. He said, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowls multiply in the earth." So God then gave them the ability to do what? Reproduce.
Yeah.
Right? So that then there's no more, you're not gonna things will come forth again. They're gonna reproduce. So He made two of his kind, and then from that day reproduction.
So He brings forth the life and tells them, gives them the order to reproduce.
And be clear on how He did it, because the story of Noah, I think, gives us insight into how that reproduction took place, even in beasts. Chapter 7.
Right.
The Lord said to Noah, "Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by the sevens, male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of the earth." To keep seed alive upon the face of the earth. The reproduction system that God established from creation was consistent between beasts and in human beings. It was always male and female.
Keep seed.
To keep seed
and
alive.
from thy seed shall all nations be. We're gonna talk about that.
That's how the reproduction element. But back to this. So yeah, going back now to verse 26.
This the key text.
That's the key text. Go ahead.
And God said, "Let us." I mean, we can't even move forward without all these things, man, but
He said,
let's just read it first here.
All right. Let's read it first.
We're going to read the text first. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." And verse 27, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he, male and female created he them. And God blessed them," the same thing that Duran was just talking about. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish," once again, "of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth."
Keep on
Keep reading?
No, yeah. I'll take some.
Yeah, you should go to
Finish it. "And God said," verse 29, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat."
Plant-based.
Plant-based.
Sidebar.
No, you're gonna say
I
something.
want to say something about that. Everything, just based on based off everything we've read, everything God is giving us is living, right? It's like it's living. And He wants us to eat living things, right? Because if you want to have life, you feed yourself life, right? I just wanted to say that because I thought that was interesting. Somebody made that point where it was like, why do we eat dead things? And I was like, facts. Like, God created living things for us to consume. But go ahead,
All right, let's finish up.
Commercial.
But God saw, verse 31, God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good.
Very good.
I think that's key because we go back, He never said anything else was very good.
That's
Everything
a good point.
else, if you search back before, it said, and God saw it, and it was good. And the evening and the morning was
But
the
with
first
us,
or
it's
second
very
day. But
good,
this
yeah.
one, He said, and God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
So
God said, let us make man.
we're right there, 26. All right, what do you say?
What are we talking about there?
What are we talking about?
Let us make man.
Who is speaking? I think we kind of talked about this in previous episodes, but now it's kind of getting into the creation aspect of it, right? So let us, when we were talking about who is I mean, if we could poll who's watching and listening, you know, it could be like, hey, what did y'all get? Who was here? Who was talking to who? And I think we came up with the conclusion that it was the Father speaking to His Son, all right? So when it says this, and, you know, yeah, His Father speaking to His Son. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So, Father, Son, it's two people, two beings. So if they are going to make someone or something in their likeness, in their image, think of a mirror at least. And this is a small scale perspective, but think of a mirror. How many people or beings would you create if you're saying, I want something to reflect me? You know, I think we complicate this thing way too much. So once again, we're unlearning what we've learned before. I mean, it was difficult for us, I know, for myself, you know, just having to relearn things because I was taught certain things that numerically don't make sense and just in general don't make sense. So you know, what are we seeing here that we kind of want to highlight off the top besides that? All right, Father, be with us again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I feel like I started the same way every time too. All right. So we are unlearned.
Do you have like a mantra or something?
Look, man,
Unlearned, like.
you got something better?
I'm saying, do we have one? Or we just read the text again every time?
We starting with a text. All right. I think I start with all right every time too. Good morning. On our last episode,